This story is about alien med students facing their worst nightmare. A patient flatlines and nothing works. Then a human medic bursts in and does something no alien textbook prepared them for. The training room aboard the Tanzari medical orbiter smelled of sterilized polymers and the faint tang of ozone from charged diagnostic panels. A dozen alien students, scales gleaming under the sterile light, clustered in a semicircle around a simulation bed. It wasn't a simulation this time. The body on the bed, a Zarnathi diplomat, had just suffered a sudden cardiac collapse during a routine health demonstration. The alarm was real, the vitals were real, the panic blooming behind the compound eyes of the alien students was most certainly real. Dr. Halem Yix, a six-limbed Alexian with a drooping crest and jittering ocular ridges, barked out, "Initiate the advanced resuscitation sequence. Sectors 1 through 4 begin neural integrity scan, ventricular pacing to 30 millijoules, activate biopulse injectors." The students scrambled, chittering in rising confusion as their limbs fumbled at the unfamiliar machinery. One student, a red-scaled trilar named Vel, managed to activate the biopulse injector upside down. The device vibrated once, let out a high-pitched whine, then powered down uselessly. The heart monitor shifted from a chaotic squall to a flat line. Long, unbroken. The room froze. No, reset the sequence," Dr. Yix shouted, nearly knocking a student over with one elbowed limb. "The neurosync is unresponsive," barked another, fins flaring in alarm. "No cardiac pattern detected," Vel whispered, stunned. A loud thud startled them all. The room's side door had slammed open. Out of the way came the low growl of a voice unlike theirs, short syllables, harsh tone, a Terran. He was tall for a human, lean, not bulky. Scrubs rolled to the elbow, gloves pulled on mid-stride, dark hair pulled back in a tie. His ID tag read, "Lucas Brandt, Trauma Medic." He didn't walk, he stormed. "You! Move!" He barked at the nearest student blocking the bed. They scattered like startled animals. Brandt didn't glance at the monitor. He didn't need to. "Vitals," he snapped. "No pattern," Dr. Yix stammered. "The myocardial activity is absent. Biopulse..." "Too slow," Brandt muttered. He climbed onto the edge of the bed, planted one knee beside the Zarnathi's limp form. He clenched his right fist, raised it high above his shoulder. "What are you?" Vel began. Brandt brought his fist down with terrifying precision, straight into the alien's chest. Thump. The whole body jolted. Half the students recoiled in shock. One gagged, another fainted, thudding against the floor tiles. "Again," Brandt growled. Thump. The chest caved slightly under the force. More sensors screeched in protest. Thump. Then one soft, high-pitched tone. Then another. The heart monitor fluttered, then kicked into a rapid rhythm. Fast, erratic, but present. Dr. Yix stared, jaw slightly ajar. What did you just... Was that blunt force resuscitation?" "It's called a precordial thump," Brandt grunted, checking the readings. "Old school. Rarely works, but sometimes you don't have time for polite medicine." "You struck him with your closed hand." "Yeah, 3 times. He's alive, isn't he?" Vel whispered. "But that's not in any of the protocols." "No," Brandt said, slipping off the bed, sweat beading at his brow, "because protocols weren't written by panicking students in a real crash. They're written by people who've never had to fight a dying heart with their bare hands." The students stared in stunned silence as the Zarnathi's breathing began to shallowly return, assisted now by correctly calibrated support. Brandt turned to leave. "Next time you're rewriting your textbooks, include a chapter called "Do Whatever the Hell Works." He didn't look back. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 45 minutes later, Brandt stood in the observation room beside Dr. Yix and a cluster of supervising medics. The Zarnathi was sedated and stabilized now, his chest bandaged and monitors chirping steadily. The human's shoulders were tense, jaw tight. He'd been pulled for debrief, not commended questioned. "You used an aggressive, unauthorized intervention," said one monitor technician, a Terek scholar with a long cranial ridge. Is that standard human protocol? It's not standard anything. It's desperate, Brandt replied. You endangered the patient. He was already dead. Dr. Eakes raised a hand. Technically, he was clinically dead for 8.3 seconds. Brandt shot him a look. And technically, you lot were standing around watching him die. Silence. Dr. Yeesh finally spoke. We cannot ignore the outcome, however, I confess. I have never observed such a direct form of cardiac restoration. You used blunt trauma to the thoracic region. It's called a thump, precordial. It's not taught much anymore, even on Earth. Last-ditch move sometimes resets arrhythmia if applied in the first seconds of cardiac arrest. Are you often expected to punch people back to life? Vel asked from the back, still pale. Brandt let out a short breath. Only when nothing else works. The silence that followed was heavier this time. Not judgmental, curious, wary, respectful maybe. I wish to analyze the efficacy of this technique, Dr. Yix said at last. Perhaps there is more to learn. Brandt gave a tight nod. Just make sure you're not trying it on anyone with brittle bones. It's not exactly gentle. From the other side of the observation glass, the Zarnathi's monitor kept beeping. 3 days later, Brandt was back in the orbiter's medbay classroom, arms folded, watching with visible discomfort as a holographic replay of his chest thump intervention looped again. It looked more brutal each time. The angle, the force, the way the Zarnathi's chest dipped under the blow, it left the alien students audibly unsettled. The instructor's voice droned behind him. Observe the application of kinetic energy at the 5th intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Note the shoulder mechanics. Brandt shifted his weight. He hated watching himself do it. In real time, it had been instinct, barely a decision. Now it looked like something out of a combat training sim. Vel raised a scaled limb. But wouldn't that level of impact cause damage to skeletal structure? Brandt turned. Yeah, can crack ribs, might even cause internal bruising, but again, better bruised than dead. A Prillian student with translucent blue skin interjected, yet such action bypasses all known safety protocols. What if the patient had a weaker thoracic wall? If the thump caused pericardial bleeding? Then we'd deal with that next, Brandt said, his voice low but even. You don't do this unless the patient is about to die. You do it because they're about to die. Dr. Ishii stood to the side, arms crossed. Perhaps we should return to demonstration. Medic Brandt, would you be willing to participate in a simulated resuscitation scenario? I'll lead, but I'm not punching a dummy. That's not how this works. Yeeks nodded. Agreed. It is the decision-making under pressure we aim to replicate. They transitioned to a training bay where a specialized cardiac simulator humanoid and programmable lay on a table. The students formed teams, each tasked with stabilizing a different simulated species using real-time diagnostics and response tools. Brandt walked from team to team, correcting grip positions, pointing out delays, reminding them to announce every action aloud. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence carried weight now. One simulation went south quickly. Vel's team again fumbled under rising pressure. The dummy's vitals flatlined after a simulated drug interaction. Vel started initiating a neuropulse sync, but Brandt stopped him. What do you hear? Silence. Vel's gills twitched. No rhythm. A systole. Then why are you syncing a brain that has no blood going to it? Vel blinked. You start compressions. You push blood. No blood, no brain. You got 8 minutes, best case. Vel hesitated. Brandt locked eyes with him. You freeze, they die. Vel began compressions. Afterward, Vel approached him. How do you not freeze? I do, Brandt said. I just keep moving anyway. Later that cycle, in the medical canteen where the food was unrecognizable and the chairs refused to stay still, Brandt nursed a cup of something called Gelarin broth. It tasted vaguely of rust and burnt seaweed. Across from him, Dr. Yix sat with a small stack of holopads. You've caused considerable debate, Yix said. Wouldn't be the first time. Protocols are built for predictability, for preventing harm. Your action was an exception. Yix nodded. Your physiology allows you to exert significant localized force without damaging your own structure. That fascinates many of our researchers. Brandt snorted. We've spent millions trying not to die of our own stupidity. Guess it paid off. Humans possess a cultural tendency to act before systems allow. This can result in surprise, survival, because if we wait for permission, someone's already gone. Yix eyed him for a moment. I requested additional human case studies. The technique you used, was it truly common once? In field medics? In war zones, maybe? In emergency rooms? Rare, even controversial. But every one of us trained in trauma knows it exists. Some of us have used it. Once, maybe twice. Yix slid a pad over. We wish to run comparative trials, not using blunt force, just simulations, physiological modeling, but the council has questions. One in particular wishes to speak with you. Brandt didn't answer immediately. He stared into his broth. Yeah, he said at last. All right. It wasn't a conference room, it was a chamber. Round dome, darkened except for a suspended holographic projector, and 6 elevated seats occupied by council representatives from the Core Medical Coalition. The representative who spoke was a narrow-eyed virith with floating sensory nodes that hovered like lazy sparks around his neck. Mr. Brandt, the voice echoed slightly, you performed an unapproved and undocumented resuscitation procedure. Why? Brandt stood, hands at his sides. Because the patient was going to die. You bypassed the attending physician. No one was acting. Why didn't you administer electrical stimulation? There wasn't time to set it up. Do you acknowledge that your actions could have caused irreversible injury? Yeah. And that they were effective? Yeah. Silence followed. Then another voice, a Korathi with feathered cranial ridges, spoke. Do humans often resort to such improvisation? Only when we run out of everything else. Why do you think it worked? Brandt exhaled. Sometimes the heart just needs a shock to start again. Not an electric one, a physical jolt. Old trick. Doesn't always work, but when it does, it's because you hit the reset button before the whole system collapses. The virith floated forward slightly. And you trust yourself with that judgment. Brandt met the alien's many eyes. Every time I do it, I remember exactly how bad it could go. That's the only reason I should be allowed to try. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then the Korathi whispered, fascinating. Brandt left the chamber an hour later, with no punishment, no commendation, just a request. Provide a formal training session. Teach the other species what he knew, including the part where it sometimes didn't work. In the following weeks, the orbiter hosted the first interspecies emergency medicine seminar led by a human trauma medic. Brandt's sessions were blunt, intense, and sometimes awkward, but they worked. More importantly, the aliens started to understand. Not just the action, the mindset, not recklessness, not heroism, just something human. 4 weeks passed. The Zarnathi diplomat had survived. After multiple scans, 3 days in induced stasis, and a slow rehabilitation process, he was awake, coherent, and aware enough to request tea. The ribs were bruised, one slightly cracked but healing well. According to the attending physicians, the physical trauma was within acceptable harm margins considering the alternative. Brandt hadn't seen him yet. He was spending his days in the simulation labs, teaching alien students how to handle what he now called the 10 seconds. The term caught on fast. Everyone understood what it meant, those frozen moments between life and death, where procedure and panic collided. No one taught it better than Brandt. His teaching style was informal. He used idioms no translator could fully explain. He asked questions like, what do you do when the kit's empty and your gloves are wet? And which would you rather have, one broken rib or a dead diplomat? The students took furious notes, even when they didn't quite understand him. But he wasn't always patient. When one group hesitated during a cardiac arrest simulation, he pulled the plug mid-procedure. "You let him die," he said flatly. "But the dosage conversion was unclear," argued a three-eyed Kirvas medic. Brandt didn't blink. "You had a pulse window. You chose to hesitate. You wait for perfect clarity, you get a perfect death." Harsh words, but the lesson stuck. One morning, Vel approached him before class. "The diplomat has requested you." Brandt blinked. "What now?" Vel nodded. "He insisted, says he has questions." Brandt stood motionless for a moment, then set down his datapad. "Fine." They took the long route, passing through the upper medical wing, where the air smelled cleaner and the lighting was warmer. The Zarnathi recovery suites resembled terrariums, humidified, dim, with soft moss lining the walls. The patient, Ambassador Yekot, reclined in a shallow pressure chair, with sensors lining his chest and neck. Brandt entered slowly. No ceremony, just a quiet nod. "You are the human who struck me," Yekot said, voice rasping. Brandt gave a half smile. "Yeah, sorry about that. No apologies. I have reviewed the footage. I find it compelling. Wasn't pretty." "No, but effective." Yekot gestured toward his chest. "You risked breaking me to wake my heart. You were already gone." Yekot studied him. "Why do your people allow such force in healing?" "We don't, mostly. Not unless there's no time to ask permission." There was a pause. The Zarnathi's large eyes narrowed slightly. "Would you do it again? If I had to?" The ambassador tilted his head. "I think you should know I remember none of it. But I have decided to formally acknowledge your act during my species intermedical council. It will be controversial. I'm not interested in medals." "This is not a medal. It is a controversy. You may be called to testify." Brandt sighed. Figures. That afternoon, the simulation center buzzed with a new kind of tension. Rumor had it another real case drill was coming, this time unannounced. The students were twitchier than usual. Even Vel fidgeted, adjusting the cuffs of his uniform sleeves every few minutes. When the alert sounded, no one jumped. They moved. It wasn't a simulation. A merchant vessel had docked unexpectedly after sending a distress beacon. One crew member, young, Terran-adjacent physiology, was unconscious, shallow breathing, unknown toxin exposure. Emergency teams responded, and for the first time, the alien students were invited to assist under direct supervision. Brandt was already at the intake station when the stretcher arrived. "Vitals?" he asked before anyone else could. "Arc rate fading, oxygen saturation dropping, toxin unidentified. Any chest pain before collapse?" The answering medic, a Krellian with 3 diagnostic limbs, shook his head. "He was incoherent, seizures, then apnea." Brandt nodded once. "Get the crash cart. I want full spectrum toxin screen, stat. Vel, you're with me." Vel's eyes widened, but he followed. Inside the trauma bay, chaos snapped into rhythm. Brandt directed with short bursts of orders, his hands always in motion. The patient, young, blue-veined skin, barely responsive, arched once, then slumped flat. The heart monitor squealed. Flatline. "All right," Brandt muttered. "We're here again." "Recordio?" Vel asked, voice uncertain. "No," Brandt said. "Rhythm's too far gone. This one's a full code." Vel started compressions. 2 other students followed with intubation prep and IV insertion. Brandt monitored the timing. "Push 1 milligram stimulene," he ordered. "And someone start a blood filter. Get that toxin out." The seconds dragged. Compressions, injections. Nothing. Still flat. "Charging to 100 joules," someone called. Clear. The patient jolted. And again. Finally flickers. Then rhythm. Brandt exhaled slowly, letting his shoulders drop. Bell looked up at him, drenched in sweat. Did we do it? Brandt checked the monitor. Yeah, he's back. No chest thumping this time, just coordination, just teamwork. Later in the debrief, Dr. Yix addressed the class. Today, none of you waited for direction. You responded, you adapted, you saved a life. Brandt stood in the back, arms crossed. Vel turned toward him. No punches this time. Brandt gave a tired smile. Didn't need one. The students laughed softly, tensely, but genuinely. It was the first time they understood. The point wasn't the punch. It was knowing when you didn't need it. 2 months after the Zarnathi incident, the medical wing aboard the Tenzari orbiter felt changed. Not in structure or routine, those remained maddeningly precise, but in mood. Alien students walked with more urgency now. They called out vitals aloud during simulations, made decisions quicker, and occasionally threw in a rapid-fire human expression with barely any idea what it meant. Brandt's sessions had grown crowded, spilling beyond the intended audience. Non-medical personnel drifted in, seated at the back, watching quietly, even a few diplomats. Today was supposed to be the final seminar. The title, as listed on the rotating hollow board, was Adaptive Trauma Response Strategies Across Species, Bridging Protocol and Instinct. It should have been routine. It wasn't. It started with a quiet alert level 2, then a repeat, then a rising hum of whispers. A diplomatic cruiser in orbit had suffered a minor reactor leak. Nothing explosive, but a handful of crew were exposed to rapid onset hypoxia and volatile fumes. They were being shuttled in for emergency oxygenation. This time there was no crash, no shouting. The triage center was ready. Brandt was already scrubbed and moving before the second shuttle docked. 5 patients, 3 conscious, 2 not. The human medic didn't need to give orders, his presence was enough. His students, once hesitant and flailing, were now executing with grim precision. The first patient, a Thalnian with silver-green skin, arrived gasping. His oxygen saturation was below 40%. Dr. Yeeks coordinated immediate hyperbaric chamber entry. The second, a Saurian, trembled with early nerve exposure symptoms. Vel applied pressure scan neuro readings and sedated carefully. Then the third came in. Human, mid-40s, drenched in sweat, lips blue, shallow pulse. Brandt's chest tightened. He pushed through. What's his O2 level? Dropping fast, someone called. 72 and falling. No pulse, shouted another. Brandt saw the monitor spike once. Then, nothing. Flatline. He stopped. So did everyone else. But only for a second. Start compressions, he barked. Push 1 milligram epinephrine. Begin oxygen flush at full rate. Get an airway in now. Val was already on the chest. Another student pushed the injection. A third slid the oxygen mask on. 30 seconds passed. Still, flatline. Brandt looked at the readout. No arrhythmia, no mechanical flutter, not even fibrillation. Nothing to shock. He stepped back. He looked down at the man, then looked around the room. 12 students, 4 instructors, 2 nurses, all watching. He opened his hand, curled it into a fist, stepped forward, and stopped. No, he said. Vel looked up. What? He's too fragile. You see that scar on his left rib? Surgery. Recent. I punch him there, I puncture his lung. So what do we do? Brandt clenched his jaw. Back to basics. He switched with Vel and started compressions himself. Slow, deep, counting aloud. Bam, 2, 3. Push another milligram, he called. Draw atropine. Prepare another round. Dr. Yex stepped in silently, monitoring. Minutes passed. Everyone kept working. Then the monitor beeped. Once, then twice. Then a slow rhythm began to form. Sinus rhythm, someone whispered. Brandt leaned back, breath catching in his throat. Bell exhaled hard. You didn't punch him. Didn't need to, Brandt said. Knowing when not to is the whole point. Dr. Yick spoke softly. Your restraint saved him. Brandt didn't reply. The patient was wheeled out, stabilized, and monitored. The room stayed still for a moment longer. Then someone chuckled quietly. And someone else joined. Within seconds, a round of exhausted, relieved laughter spread through the team. Hours later, the lecture hall was dimmed. The seminar was canceled, replaced by an informal gathering. Students and instructors sat on tiered benches, sipping nutrient drinks and retelling the day's events, with the blurry haze of adrenaline starting to fade. Vel sat beside Brandt, who leaned back, eyes half closed. You know, Vel said, your technique, the thump, it's become a bit of a legend. Brandt gave a faint smile. Not the legacy I imagined. You changed how we think. I didn't change anything. I just showed you something ugly that worked. But it's not just the punch, it's everything around it. The urgency, the refusal to freeze. You've made us ask questions we weren't trained to ask. Brandt was quiet for a while. Then he said, you asked me weeks ago how I don't freeze. Bell nodded. I do, Brandt said again. I just move anyway. They sat there a while longer. Finally, Brandt stood, stretching. I'm transferring off station next week, he said. Vel turned sharply. What? Why? Too many people here thinking I'm some miracle worker. That's dangerous. I don't want anyone copying what I did without knowing when not to. Vel frowned. But you taught us that. Still, better I leave while you remember the point. Where will you go? Doesn't matter. There's always someone flatlining somewhere. Bell stood too. You know, if I ever freeze again, I'll remember something. Brandt raised an eyebrow. Vel tapped his own chest gently. That's sometimes, when there's nothing left, punch life back in. Brandt chuckled. Don't make a habit of it. They shook hands, firm, respectful. Human and alien. No protocols. Just understanding. And somewhere in the deep silence of orbit, a heart monitor kept on beeping.